So, good morning, everybody. I want to talk about AEW Dynamite, and definitely this was a very, very controversial and a very daring show. And I do want to talk about the main event first because I do think, that's the most important thing between MJF and Brody King. And what happened was that there was like a squash match between MJF and Brody King. So Hangman distracts MJF. MJF gets, hung by Brody King. He does it with his arms. Then Brody King hits him with a cannonball, then a gonzo bomb, one, two, three. And then we're going to have MJF versus Brody King in Australia. So there's a couple of things about this that I was really for this decision for a couple of things. That number one, AEW has been getting a lot of just flack for not pushing big men. So obviously this is very helpful. And then the other part of it is Brody King's the right big man for AEW because he's very athletic. He can do like the cannonball and other very athletic moves, and he's kind of really proven himself. So you have to kind of say, okay, audience, we know that we don't push big men that well. So Brody King has everything that we need. We can have him fuck around in a tag team and repeat what he's been doing the past 5 or 6 years he's been with AEW, or we can do something different. And then also, if you think about it, it's a little bit of foreshadowing because what happened with MJF and Wardlow, he got buried really, so you never know what can happen. I also think that because MJF looks so, because Brody King looks so dominant, you have to kind of wonder maybe in a way that this is very helpful for him because he could be the AEW champion at Australia. I really don't think they're going to do that. But it never hurts to say, hey, let's try it for a couple of months. Let's do something different. Because a lot of people are expecting MJF versus Will Ospreay at Wembley Stadium, or MJF versus, or Hangman versus Ospreay, or something like that, really. Or whoever's somebody like that. Or maybe Kenny Omega becomes a champion. So it's Kenny Omega versus Ospreay, or AJ Styles versus Ospreay. But you can do something like say, okay, well, it's a couple of months away. Let's give the title to somebody else. Real. Let's say, oh, well, maybe it's not MJF. We're going to give it to Brody King for a while, maybe for a month or two, then give it back to MJF or something like that. There's always something that they can do to kind of say, well, let's make it a little unpredictable. And sometimes unpredictability is okay. And sometimes unpredictability doesn't work. Sometimes it can work very well, and sometimes it can not work very, very well. So I think that this is an unpredictable thing really worked for AEW. And I also will say that the predictable thing would have been MJF taking Brody King in the nuts or disqualify or getting himself disqualified, and then Brody King gets a shot, or Brody King and them having like a 20-minute match and then Brody King losing, because a lot of times people lose eliminators. So I am okay with this. I know it's a controversial decision. I understand it buries MJF a little bit. I understand that the post-match stuff with Andrade and Hangman and other people interfering, that kind of hurt Brody King a lot because it's like saying now he looks so dominant, but now we're taking the attention off of him. It's like when Mike Santana won the TNA Championship at Bound for Glory. They were doing a bunch of post-match stuff with Andrade. No, with a couple of different people. So sometimes you have to let your star shine. Sometimes when you put the Christmas tree together and you put that star on top of the Christmas tree, that has to be the final thing. The icing on the cake, really. You can't just add another layer of icing or more sprinkles, because then again it becomes way too much, really. And I think that's what they did. They did something that was daring and different for AEW, but then they oversaturated with other stuff, which kind of diminished it. So the unpredictability factor of AEW, I'm appreciating that a lot more. So I want to talk about the rest of the show. It opens with, and I got my handy dandy notebook with me. If you see me look off camera a little bit. What happens is that it opens with a promo package, and I really appreciate them doing promo packages. They should do more of that, or like maybe almost every show they should do that. Sometimes you can do things a little differently. Try and make it a little unpredictable, but it opens with a promo package. So MJF talked about his motivations. Brody King talked about his motivations. Kenny Omega talks about his motivation. Don Callis talks about what his family's doing, his motivation, Babes of Wrath, Penelope Ford, Megan Bain. The reason why this is all really good is it does two things. That it says, well, this is what the show is about. We're not starting with random matches. We're actually starting with a story, with context, and with a structure and with a format. That this is all building a story, really. Because again, is this professional wrestling where it's a story leading to matches, or is this a video game where it's just or it's just two people being plugged into the system, and then shit happens, really. And then also it's good because you have people like Brody King, and you have people like the Babes of Wrath, Penelope Ford, Megan Bain, who don't get that much on mic time. So you kind of like do that thing too, where everybody is actually just you know everybody's really, really just getting some time on the microphone. The first match is Death Riders versus the Don Callis family. Moxley, Dan Garcia, Pac, Takashita, Josh Alexander, and El Clone. And I was kind of saying to myself, I was very worried about this match because I thought that El Clone was going to be pinned. I'm seeing that he was pinned by Mark Briscoe last week, and I was saying, are you trying to save him for hologram? So ultimately, why are you going to bury this guy? So I was saying too to myself, obviously, El Clone, I'm happy he did not lose. He was not pinned. David Garcia does shoulder tackles. He sends Josh Alexander flying. Takeshita does a belly to belly to Daniel Garcia and to Moxley. Takeshita does a Blue Thunder bomb to Daniel Garcia. I was saying to myself, these are both very talented trios teams. Like, imagine if they held the trios title, both these guys, or imagine if they're feuding over the trios title. Like, that would actually be a really great, thing to fight over. Because, really, you don't really have. They're doing a lot of stories in the heavyweight division, but the big problem with AEW is they don't do a lot of compelling stories in other divisions as well. Because every title is a different division if you think about it. But from what I've seen, I think Don Callis really needs to get his guys together and say, hey, we need to go after the trios titles. Or, hey, we need to save some of you guys for the tag team titles. And I'm expecting you guys to be successful with that. Another thing that I will say is that's also true with Moxley. Like, I think they should try to go after the trios titles because they do have good chemistry. So I really think that there's a lot of, in a sense, there's a lot of things that I feel shows that this shouldn't be a one-off thing. They should really try to go after the trios championship and make the trios title mean something. The next match was Orange Cassidy and Tony Storm versus a bunch of jobbers. And I did not like this match because, again, they did this on Collision, so they're kind of repeating jobber stuff. Tony Storm with a jobber, Orange Cassidy with a jobber. So I was kind of saying to myself, what would happen if they did jobbers on Collision? Now they did something like Ty Valkyrie and John Morrison, or Athena and Shelton Benjamin. Like try to raise the difficulty level. I think that would have been a little bit better. I also understood that after that, they had Orange Cassidy and Tony Storm do a bunch of dumb comedy, and that kind of led to a little bit of comic relief for the audience, really. The other thing is that after that, they showed Darby Allin. He got assaulted by the War Dogs, which is Clark Connors, if I'm saying his name correctly, and Clark Connors and that other guy. I'm trying to remember his name. I'm drawing a blank. Really, getting older, starting to lose my memory a little bit. I think Gabe Kidd. I almost said Clark Gable or Chad Gable. No, I'm thinking of two other things, but Gabe Kidd, really. The guy who sounds like Russell Crowe. I appreciate a follow-up with this, but again, it's a little kind of repetitive. And I think what I fear is what they're going to do is they're going to try to get Mark Briscoe involved. So you're going to try to get Darby Allin and Mark Briscoe versus the War Dogs at Australia. But the problem is that they may do something where they're like, hey, they may do something like they're like, hey, instead of Darby Allin going after the the heavyweight title. Why not put him and Mark Briscoe together for a couple of months? And that's actually a bad thing because Darby Allin has consistently wanted to go after the heavyweight title, but the big problem is that he keeps getting like derailed from that. Like he was, like he wanted to go after the heavyweight title, and then he got the TNT championship. He wanted to go after the heavyweight title. Then he and Sting became a tag team. He wanted to go after the heavyweight title. Then he chose to go to Mount Everest. He wanted to go after the heavyweight title, and now they're doing this angle of him, being too reckless. And now him and Mark Briscoe, I'm predicting, are probably going to become a tag team for a couple of months, and that's not good because again, Mark Briscoe should be in the TNT division, or he should probably think about having another rematch with Tommaso Ciampa. But I really, really think my prediction is they're going to say, hey, Darby Allin and Mark Briscoe are going to become a tag team. And that could be something really cool. And I think they have great chemistry because they're both high-risk Daredevil, taking things a little too far, people. But it's going to put Darby Allin in the tag team division. And as I said, I think that's what's gonna happen, and that's my prediction. But it's Darby Allin being deterred from the heavyweight championship. The other thing was that the next match was Hangman versus Mark Davis. I wasn't invested in this match, and also Russell Toddy is one of my friends. She reviews AEW wrestling, and we both had the same issue where they are not really explaining very well what's going on with AEW in the World Heavyweight Championship picture. So what they said last week, and just to clarify, is that Hangman, Mark Davis, Swerve Strickland, Andrade, and like those four guys, they've been winning a lot in AEW. They've been standing out a lot in AEW, and also Kenny Omega and Hangman. Like these, four to six people, they stand out in AEW a lot. So what's happening is that they're having a bunch of matches with each other. And the winners of all these matches that they're having is going to face, is gonna have a semifinals match in Australia, and the winner of that semifinals match is going to face MJF or Brody King for the World Heavyweight Championship at Revolution. So this week it's Hangman versus Mark Davis, and I believe Kenny Omega had a match tonight. He had a match against Josh Alexander. He had a match with Andrade, but the thing about it is that it was very confusing, and a lot of people were like saying, a couple of things. Like first of all, Mark Davis was in the tag team division, so why is he wrestling Hangman? And Mark Davis has been out for a long time, I believe on injury, and he's not done promos. There's nothing like that is compelling, so it really feels like a random ass person really against Hangman. So it feels like a person who's very out of his league really. He's just a big guy. That's the only appeal to Mark Davis. So I was kind of like saying like this is a little this really throws me off really. And I also don't like it that they should have had brackets. They should have said, okay, last week it was Swerve versus Kenny Omega. This week the bracket is Hangman versus Mark Davis, Kenny Omega versus Andrade. Okay, then show who's facing each other. Because I think the reason why they're doing it like this with rankings is because last month they had the Continental Classic. But sometimes, even if you're going to have another tournament, you have to show tournament brackets. You have to show, okay, this is actually not people having matches. We're gonna this is actually a tournament without calling it a tournament. So just call it a tournament either way, even though it may be a little repetitive. It just makes more sense to people. So I did get confused. I was actually a little confused and not really put into this match. And then the other thing about this match is that while there were some good spots, I wasn't invested because we all know what happens when you have a lot of these people like Hangman. They're going to win, obviously. So I wasn't invested in this. The next match I was invested in. It was Kenny Omega versus Andrade. Again, when I was watching this match, part of me wasn't invested because usually, Kenny Omega is going to win. It's going to be Kenny Omega versus Hangman. That's the predictable option. However, Andrade wins, and there's some controversy because what happens is that towards the end of the match, Don Callis comes out with a screwdriver, very predictable. Omega tries, Swerve comes out and tries to save Omega from getting hit by the screwdriver, being screwed out of his opportunity. And then because Kenny Omega tells Swerve to just get out of it, mind his own business, really. And what happens is that Andrade takes advantage of the distraction. So Andrade beats Kenny Omega by distraction or everything like that. So I understand what they're trying to do with this. They're trying to get to Swerve versus Kenny Omega either at one of the Australia shows or Revolution. And I have no problem with that. Like, try to keep everybody busy. And then also, again, you take your biggest stars and you actually utilize them. That's important, really. You think of WWE. It was John Cena, Shawn Michaels, Randy Orton, Batista, Edge. Every single pay-per-view, they always had matches with each other or somebody else, really. So the important thing is that you make everybody matter, really. You build to shit. And then also, that's one of the reasons why I think Revolution's usually one of their best shows. Because with Revolution, they have like 3 months, they have like about 2 to 3 months off because they don't consider the Australia shows their pay-per-view, really. So it kind of gives them some time to kind of build to Revolution, make that really, really strong. They also had the Babes of Wrath versus Megan Bayne and Penelope Ford. They call it the Mega Bad, and that's a stupid-ass name. I felt that this was a bad match in a couple of ways. That number one, Megan Bayne had some cool high-flyer spots. That's the only thing that stood out. But the other thing that was bad about this match is that it looked like there were 5 women versus 5 women. So a lot of people thought there was going to be a blood and guts or an anarchy in the arena match, or something like that caliber in Australia. And I think that's what they should have done. But they're not doing that. They're actually going to try to do and then also the other issue is that this is an eliminator match. I think that the problem is in the main event you did an eliminator match with MJF and Brody King. So why would I want... Isn't it too repetitive? Isn't it like having... chicken soup as the appetizer and chicken parmesan as the main course, really? Isn't it a little too, repetitive? Or it's like having beef stew and a porterhouse steak, really. You get what I'm trying to say, really. It's a little repetitive. Or it's almost like having a bowl of pasta and then spaghetti and meatballs. It's a little too... don't do 2 eliminators in the same night, really, especially since you're going to have such a surprise in the main event with how they booked it. The last match that I'll review is that they did Jack Perry versus Ricochet. Again, I was not happy with this because of 2 things. That number one, that they already had a match on Collision, so this is just a repeat. Number 2 isn't Jack Perry in the Trios division with the Young Bucks? Also, Ricochet should be going after the Trios title. Because you imagine Ricochet in the Gates of Agony, the Young Bucks, and Jack Perry, the Outrunners and Dalton Castle, Don Callis family, Death Riders. They're all in the Trios division. That's a very, very competitive division. And then you have the tag team division. You have a couple of tag teams. You have FTR. You have 2 members of Don Callis family. You may bring the Acclaim back together or do a thing where they go after singles titles but support each other. You can do Hangman and Swerve. You can do Edge and Adam Copeland. There's so many ways that they can kind of segregate people to certain divisions, and that's what they really need to do, really. And it's as what a lot of people say, that's not good when you have Jack Perry trying to go after the national championship when you kind of establish that he and the Young Bucks are together. Why is a person who was a single star going after who's a trios champion, who is a trio star, who is a tag team, who's either a tag team or trio star, but mostly a trio star, why is he going after a national championship? In WWE, they don't really do that much. Very rarely they do that. It would not make sense for AJ Styles. he and Dragon Lee were tag team champions. That's the last title that AJ Styles won in WWE was the tag team championships. It would not make sense for him to be a tag team champion and then he's trying to challenge the United States champion, or he's trying to challenge the NXT champion, or he's trying to challenge the TNA champion or whoever while he's holding the WWE Tag Team Championship because it kind of what's the word it's just too much. It's just it's just too much. It makes it kind of confusing, really, and it's like it creates a lot of plot holes. It does not make sense to do something like that. But it's announced that what it's announced is that I think like next week on Dynamite that there's a contendership match. So it's gonna be like four tag teams or something like that. And what happens is that maybe the winner of that contendership is gonna have a match in Australia. I think that's what they're trying to say, really, but I really just didn't. I really just got like kind of like a little put off by how they worded it. And then what happened was Gabe Kidd. There's another video where Gabe Kidd and Clark Connors goes into the announce truck. They cause some hell. They force people to play footage of them taking Darby out into the desert. Like I said, I really think that Mark Briscoe and Darby Allin are going to work together to take out Gabe Kidd and Clark Connors. And then they're going to join the tag team division together. And then the main event, and just to recap, Brody King wins in a squash match. There was a fuck ice chance. A lot of people like that. If Brody King kind of gets people to say fuck ice or whatever, he should be the heavyweight champion not because of the message, because it's a contemporary issue thing. You need to have wrestlers that are reflective of the time, really. And if Brody King gets people to say fuck ice and he causes controversy with that, he should be the champion because controversy creates cash, really. And again, it says, hey, we are not like the WWE because WWE is for Donald Trump since Donald Trump is friends with them. And then the other part of it is that WWE's TVPG. You can't do a fuck ice chant in the WWE. They will do the canned heat. They will turn the microphones down. They will just plug in other crowd noise, really. But with AEW, when the audience wants to say fuck ice is what you hear, really. So obviously, ride that. The other thing too is as I said before, everything else happens in the match. He wins easily. The main event was just followed by a lot of just involvement of other people, and that was a little too much stuff, but I understand why they did that. So overall, I would say that the show had a bunch of steps forward. It had unpredictability, which is an issue for AEW. The next thing is that they worked way harder on stories. When you open a show and you have people say this is what the motivations are, then that is good. Sometimes it's okay to have subversions of expectations, unpredictability. Things don't go. Things are realistic as they're out of order. Like there's a scene in Pulp Fiction, I think, like where John Travolta aims a gun at Marvin. He goes over a speed bump and then the gun goes off. It's subversive expectations. It's unpredictable, but it's still realistic to happen. But that's also true for AEW. You have MJF who picks fights with people. Hangman, and Hangman just gives him his comeuppance. Brody King takes advantage, and then Brody King hangs. And Brody King's a bigger guy, really, and we know MJF's history with bigger guys. Like he doesn't, and also he's kind of cowardly against Brody King, really. So it really adds up. And I also think one other benefit of doing this was that you didn't see a lot of back and forth between Brody King and MJF, so it kind of keeps it at a unpredictability type of thing. Or as I said before, when the MJF Will Ospreay had that match in Little Rock, that was bad because then how was their match in Wembley Stadium so special when they kind of showed that audience everything? And then the other thing was it was almost like Adam Cole versus MJF when they were in Washington, D.C., and I actually saw that. That was a bad match because they actually had the same main event months later at Wembley Stadium. So the point of it is, sometimes a good thing about squash is that it actually a good thing about a squash is that it actually can subvert expectations really. Um, my prediction: Samoa Joe is actually going to come back and fuck over Brody King. But as I said before, my concern and what I do not want to happen is I don't want it to be Hangman, Swerve, and Samoa Joe going after MJF in back to back pay per views because it feels very, very repetitive. And then also the problem is that Hangman going after the World Championship is the story of 2025. So him facing MJF at Revolution is like, okay, ARW, all repeat wrestling. Try to do something different. Maybe Brody King versus Hangman because they both care a lot about, human rights and rights of, Hispanics. That could be Mexicans and Hispanics. That could be an interesting thing. You could do something where you have MJF come out as an ICE agent or show footage of him attacking Bandito and his family because they're Mexican, and then that could be an emotionally charged thing, and that could lead to Brody King representing anti-ICE, fuck ICE, and MJF representing ICE and privilege and doing what you want and taking things too far and getting what you want. In California, a state where people are very anti-ICE, like that's the ultimate kind of that's like the biggest energy. That's the biggest. Let's take from what's going on in the world now, and let's kind of make this an allegory of ICE versus anti-ICE in AEW. I think if they do that, that's gonna be the boom. And then it's actually what I kind of said. WWE cannot do this because they're pro Trump because Trump is one of their friends. And, they're all billionaires. That's one thing. And then the second thing about it is the reason why they can't do this is because they're TVPG. AEW can do TV-14 storylines, and that's TV-14 storyline. Fuck ICE versus, fuck the illegal immigrants. So that's why I kind of say if you do Brody King versus MJF at Revolution, that could be something. If that could be something if they kind of get to that point, or you can have Brody King as the champion, become the champion in Australia, and then you Brody King versus Hangman, or maybe you do something where it's Brody King versus Hangman, MJF attacks Hangman, and he says something like, I still have my rematch clause, and he just raises a bunch of hell the next couple of weeks, and then we get to Brody King versus Hangman. I know we get the Brody King versus MJF in a rematch. It's more emotionally charged, and then you can probably do Hangman versus MJF in Dynasty. But I also will give them points today because they're doing what WWE does, and this is the right thing for them to do. They're saying Swerve, Kenny Omega, Brody King, Andrade, MJF, Hangman, they're all in the heavyweight division. They're not going up and down to other divisions. They care about the heavyweight division. They care about their contenderships. They care about getting that title shot at Revolution, really. So they're acting like that shit means something. And AEW saying hey, this is what our heavyweight championship division. For a longest fucking time, they've not really done anything to they've not had a lot of clarity of who's in what division really. There's a lot of clarity now of who's in the heavyweight championship division. That's what they needed. That's very different from what it was with the Moxley Death Rider reign really. So, AEW this is actually a step in the right direction for the company. And that's all I gotta say.